So let me go to a different picture here. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, let's do it this way. Open and navigate myself to my lecture 4 folder, lectures, not lecture 4, lecture 5, and then into the file folder. I'm going to go after, let's go to 06 start. That's a good one to indicate what we need to do. 06 start. When you open up this one, first thing you need to do is go to your layers palette because this is a file that has multiple layers in it. And I want to emphasize another thing when it comes to these different selection tools. Um, the lasso, the elliptical marquee tools, um, the regular rope lasso, and the polygon lasso tool, they all select things by a shape. So it doesn't matter what layer that you have selected at the time, you'll still be able to make that shape. However, if you are on the using the magnetic lasso tool, the quick select tool, the magic wand tool, and then this next one I'm going to show you, if you're on the incorrect layer because the layer's visibility is off because there's no eyeball there, you see how the Buddha layer's got an eyeball next to it, that means it's visible. The other layers here don't have the eyeballs turned on, so that means they're not visible. As soon as I click where the eyeball should be, then that layer gets visible. If I have the wrong layer selected, so like garden, I got selected instead of the Buddha layer. Now, when I start using these tools, sometimes it doesn't quite pick up what you want because it's seeing the other layer and not seeing this Buddha layer to be selected. So that can become a problem. So make sure, working with a multi-layered file, make sure you got the right layer selected. By default, it did go to Buddha, but you just want to check and make sure. So have your layers palette open so you can check and make sure you're on the correct layer before you start trying to select something. Now, this tool here, this particular picture of the Buddha statue, I have the Buddha sitting cross-legged onto a lotus flower, and then they got this ring going around its head. Patina, which is the kind of with the particular metal, it's probably copper or bronze or something like that. As it ages and weathers, it gets this patina, which is this colorization that happens. This color is kind of a greenish gray, which also matches the green of the forest that's behind the statue. So things like magic wand selects by color. It'll get started and you'll probably be able to do a pretty good job, but then it's going to start getting some of the background selected and you're going to have a hard time kind of going back and forth with that. The magnetic lasso. All right. The magnetic lasso will probably start off kind of promising, but then when you get up here by the trees at the top, it's still going to start trying to jump into the trees to add to the selection, and you're going to have problems with that. So again, complaints were happening. So to get around that, they went to this quick select tool. Now the quick selection tool, again, if I do something like make the circle of this brush just fit inside of this ring here, I can click and have a bit tighter selection around this ring here. If I click in different sections there to select that, then I can go over top of the Buddha statue and be able to pick and select Buddha statue out a little bit faster. There's going to be areas at the top of the head, down by its ears, on the side of the head, down on the shoulder, down when you get towards the base and going across on the base. It's going to start picking up areas in the background that you didn't want. Well, that's where I would hold down that option key on my keyboard and click and drag across like the little bench area here to take that out of the selection, over here by the shoulder, over here around by the head, and kind of take these areas away from the selection and try to get that done as quick as possible. And that works. It's not, again, the best. It's not the most accurate because you'll notice when we do the next part to this, and I'm going to make a second video because I'm getting close to being over time. It's not the best, but it works. But people were, again, complaining, hey, is there something better you can do? Adobe was like, okay, sure, let's try this one. So there's another tool called the object selection tool. Now, what object select does is it selects by the object. So in your options bar up here, this is where you really got to pay attention to the options. With this particular object select tool in the options bar, the first thing is you want to make a new selection. Then you're going to skip over to where it says mode. I like the mode being at lasso because it gives me the ability to lasso around, and kind of make a lasso around areas and then let the computer figure out what in that area I'm trying to select. So that way it tries to make the selection. This is one of those AI powered tools that they have here now. Rectangle is another option where you can just make a rectangle, but I just like the lasso option on the mode. So I always change it to that. Hard edge and sample all layers. Sample all layers would look at all the layers that are visible and try to make the selection based on that. Don't really like to have that happen, but hard edge would let you make a hard edge selection around everything instead of a soft transitional edge. So like the green of the forest would not be picked up in the selection, in the final result. So hard edge is an option that you can have turn on. Because you're using one of these AI tools, here's one more extra thing that you want to add in when starting to using some of these tools. Right here where it says select subject, there's a little drop down arrow. You're going to hit that drop down arrow and make sure that it's set to cloud. Now, what in the world is this? For the AI tool to work properly or to work efficiently, it needs to be connected to the internet. So whether you're trying to create new pictures using the AI Firefly tool to create new images, or you're using the AI feature here within this object select tool to try to select your object, you want it to be connected to the internet so that way it can use the power of the internet and its AI feature to kind of examine the picture, figure out what needs to be the selected thing that you're trying to select, and do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. But it's a detailed thing, so it runs a little slow. If you're on a laptop, you're not connected to the internet, then it's going to default over to the device, which is based on a quicker selection, and it's whatever your computer's processing power is to be, whatever the efficiency of that. So the way this works. One more option that I don't see. Hold on. Yeah, object select tool. Hold on. I'm looking for something that used to show automatically, and it was an option you could turn on and turn off. Hmm. Hold on. Because it was kind of a cool option. That's why I'm wondering why did they put it under there? That is weird. Okay, so they moved this option that I was looking for. So in the little gear icon right there in the options bar, there's this thing called an object finder. It used to be just one of the options to check on here on the bar, but now they put it under here. What object finder does, it speeds up the process of helping you select things. So if you have it turned on, which I suggest you do, when you hover over things, see how it highlights with this little kind of magenta color? All right, it highlights that to show you what it can select. So that way I can, move it over top of the Buddha. And even though it doesn't get all of it, I can see that it's picking this up. With one click, it'll create that as a selection and it'll put the marching ants around. If I go to this add the selection button, that modifier button, now I can go over here to the ring, click there, and it'll pick up the ring. I can go down here to the lotus uh, base here. It'll add that to the selection. And it doesn't quite get like there's this little transitional area between the lotus base flower and the picture, and didn't quite pick that up. That's okay, because I can use the lasso feature. This is why I like using the lasso. Because I can lasso around that area and keep just adding to what didn't get picked up. And so that way it can try to get as much of this picked out as it can. It's not perfect. Again, even though I lasso around that, it still didn't quite pick that up as adding to the selection. So I had to do little shorter lasso arounds instead of bigger. You know, if you want to wrestle with that. If you don't want to wrestle with that, that's fine. Go switch to a different tool. But this allows you with this object select tool, especially with that object finder option turned on in the gear there, just makes it easier for you to make these selections, you know, quickly. And then, like I said, I can switch to like the lasso tool, turn on the add to selection, so that way these little areas that didn't quite get picked up, you know, I can lasso around these little spaces down here at the base to pick those areas up. This little space over here on the side, I choose to subtract from selection and lasso around that. Take that out of the selection, and there I go. So now I can have my selection as I need to for what I want. All right, now, last thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to stop this video, and I'll have another one, part two, that goes into the rest of these selection tool options here. Last one of the tools is a tool that is brand new, you know, brand new as of like, say, the end of last year. I think the December update or whatever has brought this thing in. Is with the lasso tools. It's called your selection brush tool. What this does is that it gives you the options like you're painting. So if you look up in the options bar, you'll have an add and you'll have a subtract as your two modifier buttons up there. You'll have an opacity of the brush, which is just how opaque the brush is initially going to be. You could turn the opacity down so that way it's less selected. You turn it all the way up and then it's more selected um, for what you're painting. But then you also have the size and hardness level of your brush. Now, what are you doing here with this? You're painting, okay? So essentially, let me change the size of my brush here. I can paint over the Buddha statue using this brush. And when I let go of my mouse, I can go and paint some more because of this add. And I can keep painting and painting until I get everything covered that's supposed to be selected. And once I do that, if I click on another tool, move tool, the lasso, or any one of these other selection or even non-selection tools, then what happens is that the marching ants show up at that point to show me the area that I painted is now a selection area. So that's that selection brush. That's really all it's for. Um, is it useful? Probably to somebody. But again, multiple tools here to get the job done, depending on what you do and how you operate and how you think, depends on if you use the tool. Me personally, I wouldn't use the selection brush tool. I have no use for it. All right, because I'm good with the other tools and I can use the other tools. But it doesn't say it's not that it doesn't work, it's just I don't prefer using it. So that's what happens. It becomes preference more than anything else. All right.